This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. Our guest today will be retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Lee Ellis, a fighter pilot during the Vietnam War who was shot down, captured, and held captive as a POW for 5.5 years at the Hanoi Hilton. We'll talk with Colonel Ellis about his military experience, as well as his role as founder and president of Leadership Freedom, LLC, and the books he's written. Should be a good one. So,
Yeah.
It's going to be powerful.
It's true knowledge dropping right there.
Well, you guys, it's January. Tomorrow's my birthday. So
Happy birthday, Stacy.
usually my birthday's the demarcation line for whether I've taken the twinkle lights down from the holiday decorations. Do you guys have yours off?
I do the same thing, but my birthday's in March.
Oh,
Me too, but my birthday's in July. I'm like, that's either it. We're going to either leave it up all year round or we're going to really take it down now.
that's what I was gonna say. You can get away with the white twinkle lights anymore, right? People have them all throughout their trees, or
Listen.
the big Edison bulbs. People just leave them up, all
Yeah.
year.
I'm like back off the road a little bit, and I love being able to see my front porch. I'm sorry. Even when I take them down, I immediately feel like there's a drop in my mental health. I love having those lights up. It's not just Christmas. It's like a feeling of, I don't know. I like the cold. It's crisp. It feels clean. It's all sort of like one big happy smile for me.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to those shopping centers, and they have the trees with the white lights done real nice year round. It's like, oh, I just love this.
Yeah.
I love the ambiance. I love the aesthetic. I'm with Joe. I just keep them up year round.
Let's do it. Let's not put a time frame or commercialize twinkle lights. We should just normalize twinkle lights for a year round.
And most, like, the injuries with ladders, I mean, get out of here.
It's dangerous. Yeah.
It's so
Especially if you're missing body parts.
Well, true. And now that we have LED lights, it's not like it's a pull on the amperage of the house.
That's
Yeah.
right.
On the
We
power
used to
bill.
have lead paint, and now we have LED lights.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't think it's the same thing.
It isn't.
LED TVs.
I think it still glowed. Sorry, my jokes aren't good, but they're
No.
consistent.
Hence the dead air.
Consistently.
I was doing a room test on the recording.
All right, Joe.
Well, regardless of my bad jokes, please stick around. I promise I'll say something funny if you listen long enough. And we'll be back with Colonel Ellis right after the break.
Veterans, did you know that hearing loss and tinnitus are two of the top service-connected disabilities? Did you also know that there's a strong relationship between hearing loss and social isolation, and that can impact your health? In his national strategy to advance social connection, Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy expressed his commitment to combating the significant health consequences of isolation and loneliness, which he called an epidemic. Strong connections can help mitigate the many potential negative health effects of hearing loss. The Heroes with Hearing Loss program, provided by Hamilton Captel, supports veterans facing the challenges of hearing loss by sharing solutions that keep us connected. One of those solutions is Caption Telephone, which allows veterans to listen and read what is said over the phone, making it easier than ever to connect with those who matter most. As a part of the Heroes with Hearing Loss program, Caption telephones are available at no cost for veterans. For more information, including eligibility requirements, visit heroeswithhearingloss.org.
Today we're joined by retired Air Force Colonel Lee Ellis, whose full name is actually Leon, which happens to be the name of one of my favorite literary characters. Just saying. Anyway, you go by Lee. Welcome to the show, Tango Alpha Lima podcast, Lee. We are honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, Colonel Ellis, it's an absolute honor to have you here. As an Army aviator myself, who went through CRC school at Fort Rucker, now Fort Novosel, and so for those not familiar, that's Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School. I learned firsthand how the lessons of Vietnam shaped the survival training that we received there. Those lessons are rooted in the experience of heroes like you that endured unimaginable hardships. So it's deeply personal for me today, sir, to get to speak with you because of your resilience, because of your leadership that inspired generations of service members, including myself. I remember being back there in flight school and watching some of the videos from you and your generation to be able to take the lessons learned that you guys went through with your blood sacrifice to be able to instill that into us and how we should go forward. So your time at the Hanoi Hilton is a testament to the power of resilience and leadership under the most extreme conditions that a human being could be exposed to. So with that being said, would you briefly, I think it would be great to share whatever you feel compelled to about the circumstances that led to your capture and how you've been able to take those experiences as a POW to use to shape your understanding of leadership, of how you translate those lessons for people facing very difficult kinds of challenges today.
I just turned 24 years old in 1967. I was on my 53rd mission over North Vietnam, flying mostly patrolling up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and a few missions over into Laos, and a few in close air support for the Army and Marine Corps and I Corps down in northern part of South Vietnam. So I'd flown different kinds of missions, but we were flying to bomb out the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to prevent them bringing down guns and ammo and soldiers to fight in the South, because they were not supposed to be down there according to the agreement of 1954 that the Communist Party in the North Vietnam had signed. So on my 53rd mission, my airplane, we were getting shot at a lot, almost every mission. We'd had airplanes hit before, and usually when they got hit, a bullet hole would go through the wing or something. And if you got hit by anti-aircraft artillery, 37 or 57 millimeter, it would blow a hole in your tank and maybe the engine, and you'd usually make it back, at least where you could jump out and be rescued if it really fell apart. But this day, the 7th of November, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of 1967, my airplane blew up into several pieces, and the cockpit was just one of those pieces, and it was tumbling. And in the F-4, there are two pilots. The Air Force had two pilots. The Navy and Marine Corps had a pilot and a RIO, a radar intercept officer, in the back seat. But we were flying, and half my class from pilot training in 67A, which graduated in August 66, half of us across 8 bases. There were 534 of us in that class, and over half of us got an assignment that said F-4 Phantom Pipeline Southeast Asia. So we went to combat training right after we went to SEER school, and then we went to combat training, and quick as we got qualified, we went to Vietnam or to Thailand, to Ubon, Thailand, or to one of those bases in South Vietnam. So I was on my 53rd mission. I'd flown a good bit. I was flying with the wing commander and the DO and the squadron commander and a lot of guys. And new guys, I was training new guys that came into the combat zone on how we did it over there. And so that day, when that airplane blew up, I was focused on ejecting. And when it flipped, there was negative G's and my head was up against the cockpit. And then it flipped again, and it was positive G's, and I didn't want to eject with my head against the top of the canopy, and so, because I knew it'd probably break my neck, and so it flipped and positive G's, and I pulled that handle, and so did my front seater, Captain Ken Fisher, who was 88 yesterday. and we jumped out, and he was about a half a mile away from me, so I didn't focus on him. I just saw his parachute coming down. But I was planning to, I did my parachute landing fall. I hit all 5 points, just like you're trained to do, and jumped down in an old bomb crater there, and pulled out my radio, emergency radio, and I said, hey, I'm 200 meters north of, I told him to my wingman or my flight lead, I said, I'm 200 meters north of the river, start strafing. I'm headed at 300. I'm headed south to the river because we're only about a mile from the Tonkin Gulf. Well, they surrounded me and captured me quickly, and it took 2 weeks to get to Hanoi. And that's so many stories there. But what happened was I had a really good soldier who was in charge of taking me north. He was a good man. Now, he worked for the communists because he had no choice, but he was a good soldier, and he would not let them beat me up. He wouldn't let them punish me. He wouldn't let them attack me because a lot of people were trying. You know, we'd bombing up there, and the Communist Party would get out there with a bullhorn in the village and start getting them all fired up, and they'd try to come after me. And he had his soldiers protect me. And so I got to Hanoi and joined up with Captain Fisher again and two other guys, and we went into a 6.5 foot, 7 foot cell that was totally isolated in that there was no cell wall, there was no nobody on the other side of that wall. It was an empty walkway about that wide, about 2 feet wide, so that it was built that way so that we could be maximum security. We couldn't tap on the wall to anybody else. And that was for the next 8.5 months. And then I moved to Sante for a couple of years, and that's where the Raiders raided, the Sante Raiders raided in November 70, but we had already moved out. But those first few months were really hard, and we were all tortured, and they wanted to get either some kind of information, and they wanted to break us so that we would collaborate with them and do what they told us to do and not try to communicate with our peers and partners there. And of course it was us against them, and they wanted us to provide anti-war information and propaganda for them and to obey them. And we were fighting very hard not to do that, and so we got tortured. Everybody got tortured, and 95% of us did. But we bounced back, and Captain Fisher lasted longer than I did in the torture, and the other guy in the cell who was being tortured at the same time I was, he didn't last as long as I did. But when I was, we had the code of conduct, and that said you won't collaborate, you won't give any information to the enemy. And so when I finally gave in that day and filled out a 3-page biography, I cried like a baby because I was so ashamed, so sad that I could not beat them and live up to my commitment to the code of conduct. And I get back to my cell, and there's one guy already back, and then Captain Fisher came back a few hours later, and we decided that, well, we did our best. And then when we got contact with the other cells later, a few months later, we learned that everybody had been tortured to do that, same thing. And a lot of people had been tortured for other things, but you had to bounce back. You had to believe in yourself and your teammates, and you suffered and you were sad, but they'd been through that too, and some lasted longer than others. Some guys are tougher than others. And so we just, we learned to live with that, and day by day, and that's where we were. That's the early years. Wow. But we had great leadership. As we got connected out at Sante, we had great leadership, and our leaders had been there longer. Generally, the senior leaders were guys that had been there 2 years longer than I had. They got captured in 1965, and I didn't get captured till November 67. So they had been through a whole lot of torture and been in solitary confinement a lot of the times, but they just bounced back every time, every time. And that was a great example for us. You're going to suffer. You're going to suffer, but you got to stay positive and come through it. That's a long answer to your question, but
Thank you,
I'll try to answer the next one shorter.
No,
it was absolutely perfect, and we wanted to give you the opportunity to share as much as you felt. So thank you.
And honestly, if anybody's gonna talk for a few minutes here, they've heard enough of us. I think they'd love to hear from you, and so it means so much that you're here. As somebody who partially makes a living telling awful stories about themselves, I know that it takes a little bit out of you, and it's not always easy. I was a corpsman with 2-1 Marines in Fallujah. I went through some small trials myself. And I had to work really hard to find purpose. And so I'd love to ask you, and if you need to do context and go into a little bit more of what you went through, that's obviously perfectly fine. But I would love to hear some of the lessons that you learned. I mean, it sounds like you've already spoke on one, is that you've got to sort of forgive yourself for being human and move on,
Yeah.
and not hold yourself accountable, because it's easy to look back as in my case, a 43-year-old man, and go, if I could have done these things right here and it would have made my life better, I could have done this or that. And that's not fair to that 20-year-old kid that was going through that.
Yeah.
That kid did his best. And so I'd love to hear, some lessons from that time that I think might be applicable to other people that have been through struggles and trials themselves.
The thing that really helped us the most was the communications in a community that were struggling the way we were. In other words, if we'd been locked up with a guy who had never been to the war and hadn't been through torture, that'd be a whole different game, because she would not know what it was like to go through that. But when you've been locked up with people that have gone through worse torture and worse times and been there longer than you have, you really can't complain much. And they're smiling and trying to outsmart the enemy. You start to realize that, well, they survived it and they're smiling, and that guy's married and has 2 kids. I'm single, and he's been here 2 years or 3 years. It just makes a lot of difference. I think that's why it's so important. And that's one of the things the American Legion does. When I was growing up, I don't think we had American Legion in the little town I was in, but we had a VFW. And those guys would go there, World War II guys and Korean guys, they'd go there 2 or 3 times a week after work, and it was totally dry county, so there was no alcohol sold. But in the VFW, they could sell beer and whiskey, especially beer, I know, and guys would go over there and have a beer and with their buddies and talk to them, and then they'd go home. And so that connection, I think, was very important for them. And toward the end, here's another thing that most people don't know, is that in 1968, a few of the wives started putting pressure on our government. The Johnson administration the Secretary of Defense and the advisors in there had told them not to put pressure on the communists about our treatment, because they were this and that and the other negotiating or whatever. And so when in 1968, they had told the wives and families to keep quiet, not to talk about POW treatment and all that kind of stuff and what was happening. And a lot of them were MIAs, missing in action. So they rebelled and started to speak up and get into the public venture. And then when the Nixon administration came in 1969, and Secretary Laird was the SecDef, Secretary of Defense, they agreed with the wives to put pressure on them, and they started putting pressure on the communists about following the Geneva Conventions that they had signed, that they would be treated, we would be treated with lenient and humane treatment. And so that pressure all began to build in 1960, early 69, and then in the summer of 1969, there was an escape at the zoo camp, which was on the other side of town from the Hanoi Hilton. And when that escaped, they just started torturing people. Now, remember, they're getting pressured from back in the U.S. from the wives and families. It's building up. And Ross Perot and people like that were paying for these wives to fly around the country. Several of my friends' wives got together and flew to different countries, 10 or 12 countries, to put pressure on them. These were more middle-of-the-road countries that had more contact with the communists in North Vietnam. They put pressure on them to tell the communists in North Vietnam, the leaders there, to quit torturing us because they had signed the Geneva Convention. Well, when Ho Chi Minh died in September of 1969, and about 3 weeks later, in the first week of October, the Communist Party leaders in North Vietnam called in all the camp commanders and told them basically to stop the torture and to treat us differently. And so that really made a big difference. And what these wives and families did back home changed our treatment. The torture stopped. Then a year later, in November of 70, the Green Berets, the Special Forces, came and raided a camp in November 70, November the 21st, the night, it was 22nd, the morning of the 22nd. They raided the camp that I'd lived in for 2 years, and we had moved out because they had they'd taken some old barracks and made a showplace camp, and we had been moved there in July, and they weren't sure about that, so they raided the camp, and we weren't there, but they executed it perfectly. And we're still connected. We're connected with the Sante Raiders, the POWs are. But within
So they weren't able to get anyone out there?
No, they couldn't get any. There was none of us there. And not any of them. The only one that was injured was one of the guys that had to crash the helicopter inside the compound, and one of the guys broke his ankle when they crashed in, but none of them got hurt, and they executed it perfectly. But within 48 hours, we all moved back to the Hanoi Hilton, and they put us in big cells. 40, most of us, all of us except a few of the senior leaders were in cells that were about 1,800 to 2,000 square feet, and we had 40 to 60 guys in those cells. So it's an open bay cell, barracks with 40 to 60 guys. And so I had 55 guys in my cell, about 1,800 square feet for the next 2 years. And so we got healthier and healthier every day. We had time to get emotionally and mentally healthy, and we had time to get educated, because we had classes 5 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday classes, 6 days, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. You could study Spanish, French, German, Russian, geography, design and graphics, and music, whatever you wanted. You could learn to play chess. We got so involved that, I got speaking fluent French and fluent Spanish. I'd had French in college, and a 2,000 word vocabulary in German, because we were working on it every day. But we had no books, but there was some guy in that cell, or usually a couple or three, that knew a lot about something. So we just worked together, and we got healthy. That's why we have a lower PTSD rate than the combat veterans from the South who were there a year. And we're outliving our peers. Our average age now is 88. Wow. I'm 81. I'm the youngest, one of the two youngest guys that were there 5 years or more. And our marriages have been great, and I've just written a new book about POW romance, Captured by Love. It just came out a couple of years ago.
I'm glad you brought that up because during my research, I came across your publishing company, Freedom Star Media,
Yeah.
and found those books, Captured by Love, and then two other books, Engaged with Honor, and then Leading with Honor: Leadership Lessons from the Hanoi Hilton.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you, thank you. Let's see the front of that one.
Leading with
There
honor.
we go. And for those of you who are not seeing the YouTube version, he was showing us the covers of those books. But you can find the covers of those books and the books. You can buy those books online at freedomstarmedia.com or wherever you get your other books, maybe your local bookstore. You can order them there as well.
They're all on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, all those places. Yeah. And
And Valentine's Day is just around the corner. You love birds, so get out there and get the Captured by Love book for your
yeah, there's
the warm and cuddly.
20 stories of guys who were POWs 5 to 8 years. There's two guys that were there almost 6 years, or more than 5 years. I'm sorry, more than 8. One guy more than 8 years, and two guys 8 years. And most of them that were married stayed married, and they've been married over 60 years. And the ones that were married and their wives divorced them when they came home, they met somebody within a year, and now they've been married 50 years. And the guys like me that were single, I was the last single guy, I think, to get married. And I didn't get married till a little over almost a year and a half after I got home. And my wife and I will be married 50 years in next week.
Oh, that's nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So we've had great relationships, and we've been very healthy, and we just got healthy before we came home. It was a real blessing. That raid by the Sante Raiders put us back into a big camp in those big cells where we really got in community every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For the book Engage with Honor, particularly, you have that book kind of broken down by chapters that offers readers guidance on the approach to living honorably and accountability in your life. Can you break that down for me, the approach of this book and how people might can apply it?
We have a model. I'm a graphic person. I don't do graphics, but I'm a visual person. So we built a model. And that courageous accountability model is on our website. You can download it for free. But that is character, courage, and the commitment are the three in the middle of it, okay? Character, courage, and commitment. You have to have courage to have good character and maintain your commitments, okay? And then on the right side, it goes down. That takes you up to the top, and it says clarify, connect, collaborate, and close out. And in fact, last year, I did a blog every month on that model, that visual model, about character, courage, and commitment, and then clarify, collaborate. I did 2 months on collaborate and close out. And then today I did one, and I talked about, again, clarifying and connecting and collaborating and having good discussions in a meeting. So we use that model a lot, and that is a kind of it's more day-to-day practical. And Leading with Honor book has 6 chapters, 6 lessons leading yourself, and 8 lessons, 8 chapters leading others. But so those are overall leadership guidelines in Leading with Honor. But Engage with Honor, it's called, the subtitle is Building a Culture of Courageous Accountability. And you really have to believe in yourself. You have to be confident, but you have to be humble and vulnerable. And a lot of leaders are not confident enough in themselves to be humble and vulnerable. But great leaders do, because they'll look at you and they'll listen to you and say, you know what, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea. That takes confidence and humility. And when you mess up, you say, guys, I should have listened to you. I messed up on that one. And a confident leader can do that, but when you're insecure, you can't do that. Well, in the POW camps, we got very secure. When you suffered for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you come out of there very secure. Like, what's going to happen to me today that's worse than over there? So you don't worry about stuff. You just You're not insecure. And that's one reason we've been so happy is that we got healthy enough to admit when we mess up. Most of us all do. There's a couple that won't, but most of us do. And listen to other people. When you're a leader and you listen to your people, they feel more valuable. They feel more important. You don't have to do what they say, but you might learn something and you might want to do what they say. You know, they say, you know what, that was a good idea. I'm going to go do it. And they feel important. They're going to work harder. They're going to be more loyal, and they're going to be more confident in their performance. So you're helping them grow. If you think back about it, growing up, I had a very wonderful experience growing up. My parents were healthy and good, had a good life, but my friends, teenagers, my teenage friends in high school, their parents believed in me and other young people, and they treated me like I was somebody, like a real person. Well, that really, looking back now, that helped me be more confident in myself and believing in myself in that period of suffering.
Oh, thank you for that, Colonel Ellis. I think I wanted you kind of a little bit of a fun question. But maybe before I lead into that, Senator McCain, when he was POW, I think I remember hearing when he got out that he said he just wanted to read, like wanted to consume books, read and read. Was that because he wasn't in community like you guys were? Was he in isolation? Do you know what his situation was?
Well, he was in isolation for a while, you know, for a year or so in that early time. But toward the end, he was in with other people. But I think we all wanted to read. I was not a book reader. In fact, I wasn't a book reader much until I went to the Air War College and I started having to read, and I said, "This is really good."
Yeah,
Now I read books all the time. You know,
right.
I just
Not
love
only
reading
read them,
books.
but write them. It's funny what you appreciate once it's taken away and you no longer have it. Okay, so the funny play on this is if you could design your dream escape room, and I'm sure you probably wouldn't put those two together, although I'm sure you probably dreamed of mini escapes. If you were going to put puzzles, challenges, themes inspired by your time in there, what would you have put in there? Would it have been the books? What was it, the thing that you guys were craving most other than your family from your time in there? And what if and when you fantasized and thought about the ways in which you broke out? Was it to be able to return back to America to taste the foods that we always talk about when we're in the military and we're away and we don't have access to that? What was that like for you?
I think it was different things at different times because when you're 5 to 8 years, I spent 1 month deciding what kind of lawyer I was going to be and where I was going to go to law school. And I was getting information on what kind of lawyers there are and where to go to law school from guys around me secretly communicating through the walls. And I thought about that almost all day long every day. And then I spent 2 months thinking about farming because I grew up on a farm, and I thought, when I go back, I'm going to start out with about 60 acres and build it up, and I would farm for 8 or 10 hours a day, planning and calculating all that stuff that it was going to take. And by the end of 2 months, I owned almost the whole county because I didn't have to pay any taxes and I could set my own prices. So my wife, when we came back and I met my wife about a year after I got back, and we got married a few months later, but we were transferred back to Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio. I wanted to buy a farm. And she didn't push back on me. She hadn't learned to get in my face and say, "Lee, that's not a good idea. And here's why, A, B, C." And I would have listened to her. So we're different. And I listen to somebody who's direct in my face, but if they mumble a little bit and talk about something, yeah, I don't listen. So she learned to get in my face, and that's been really good. But we lived on a farm for about a year, and then she was pregnant with her 4th child. She had 2 when we got married. and she'd had second one. She was pregnant with the second one. She said, "Lee, I'm getting depressed out here on this farm. I don't have anybody to talk to, and we need to move on base." And she said, "I said, man, yeah." She said, "We need to get in counseling." Now this is 1979, early '79. No pilot has ever been to counseling, but they had a counselor on the base, and I said, "Okay," because I'm fearless, let's go to counseling. And after the second meeting with the counselor, I said, "We need to move on base." And so we sold the farm and moved on base. Oh, it
Well,
was just,
that's great. That's great, Lee. And I really, but at the core of that, I think what I'm really hearing too is the power of the mind and the
Yeah.
ability to, even when the physical things and the activities and the things that we can do, actually having the material that you can put your focus and awareness on something. And whether it's through, 8 months of, you got your Juris Doctorate. Okay, now it's on to let me become, the prize winner of, the at the county fair. And so, thank you for sharing that with us and
I
helping us
think
remember
it's
how powerful
good.
the mind is.
It's a good way to think things through before you jump into them. And when you don't have to jump into something, before you have to jump into it, before you have to make a decision. Because when we came home, the Air Force said, "You ready to go back to work?" And I said, "Flying?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Absolutely. I'm ready." And I went back and requalified for flying and became an instructor pilot right away. So, and just had great flying career. But when you have some time, it's a good time. It's a good time to think about things. Guys would play golf. They would stand up and learn how to swing their golf course, remember how to swing their golf club, and practice every day. And one guy who'd played on the Naval Academy golf team, when he came home, he got to play in the New Orleans Open a few months, like 2 or 3 months after we came home, 2 months after, maybe 6 weeks. And I think he shot 3 over par.
Wow.
He played in the Pro-Am, but
That's
wow,
remarkable.
because he had practiced almost every day the last 2 or 3 years there. Yeah.
It's funny because I hear, and it seems like a lot of the people that we talk to that really have true resilience, it's not something that happens during the bad thing. It's something that happens when you're processing it. It's something that resilience is how you take that bad thing and you learn what to do with it. And so, and you mentioned talking about leadership and how a good leader can admit their mistakes and move on and listen to people who are around them that are smarter in the specific thing that they're trying to do. My wife avoids that entire thing by just always being right. But for people like me, I feel like there's got to be a pattern of poor leadership that you see doing as a leadership consultant. You've worked with all these different ranges of organizations, but there's got to be a pattern of what you see, because there's a certain type of people, and you can probably put this into better words than I can, that are great at getting in charge and don't know what to do with it when they get there. I mean, they rise to the top. They're the cream of the crop, and they just don't have the foundation to hold it all together, or something happens when they get there that becomes a barrier between them and the leader that they could be. I'm curious what your experience is as you've consulted with all these different people and the experiences that you had and learned, the hard way. How do you point that out to people that are reaching out to you to say, "Hey, we need help here"?
You have to, as I said at the very beginning, you have to learn to listen to people. You have to learn to value people. And when we have an assessment that shows you whether you're results-oriented, mission-focused, or relationship people-focused. And you're naturally wired, 40% of the population is naturally wired for results mission. And 40% of the population is wired for people and relationships. But as a leader, you're going to have to learn to adapt to do both. Now, you won't be as good as the other guy who's a fully results focused, and you won't be as, if you're results focused, you won't be as good as the relationship people are, but you can adapt enough that nobody will know. They won't notice it. You know, just a little bit of adapting. You listen to somebody. I coached the CEO, the president of a division of a Fortune 200 company back a few years ago, and he was a West Point graduate. He was had been an Army Ranger, and now he's working as a president of a division of a company. And he was a really good guy, but he never encouraged anybody. He didn't really listen to him much. And I sat down with him and I said, you know what? You're a really good man. You're a great man, but you need to learn to adapt your behaviors to help people to feel valued, important, that you care about them, you listen to them. And he said, well, that's just not me. And I said, yes, you are a good man and you can adapt. And I'm going to show you how. And I said, last week, two weeks ago, we had a retreat. You had a retreat and I was there working with your team over here on Lake Lanier Island at the one of the hotels there. And I said, the person in charge, I said, what was that retreat like? Was it a good retreat? He said, yeah, it was great. We accomplished all our goals. We had a good time, everything. I said, well, have you told the lady who's your VP in charge of that, have you told her? He said, no. I said, I want you to write out 2 sentences to tell her she did a great job. And he worked on it for 5 or 6 minutes, and we talked about it. And I said, okay, now he had a private bathroom in his office. I'm going to stand here. I want you to go in there and open the bathroom door and stand in front of the mirror, and I want you to say it to her. Practice saying it to her. Walking, I want you to go down the hall, pretend you went down the hall, walked in her office, and I want you to say it. And I watched him a time or two, and I said, you're not smiling. I want you to smile. And smile. He said, you know, Joan, you know, that retreat you organized and conducted for us last week, that was really successful. Thank you so much for what you did. That's all you got to do. And he did it. He did it. And he started encouraging and listening to his team, and they just all of a sudden changed. Well, about a month later, I finished up my coaching assignment with him. And he said, I was in his office. He said, now, can you stay about 5 minutes after today, our meeting? And I said, yeah. That's what he asked me when I first walked in. I said, sure. He said, I want you to meet someone. Well, when we finish, he jumps up, goes out, comes in with this lady. He introduces his wife. She said, I wanted to meet you and tell you thank you for what you've done, because we have only one child, 13-year-old son, and he is sitting down with him and talking to him and listening to him, and they just have a great relationship now.
Oh, that is so warming.
And, you know, I saw this guy is now CEO of a company in Atlanta, and I was speaking. I told that story at a speaking to commissioning of UGA cadets. And a guy came up to me and said, I know who that is. And I said, well, I can't tell you who it is, but I know. He said, I know who it is. I bet I can tell you. And he named the guy. And I said, sounds like you got a good guy, but I didn't tell him it was the guy, but it was. And he said, he's the best CEO we've ever had. And I saw the guy, I'd seen the guy, my friend, a few months earlier. And I said, well, how you doing? He said, doing well. He said, how's your son? He said, we're going to run a half marathon together on Saturday. And then his son graduated from college, is working in a business here in Atlanta. He said, we're going to run a half marathon together on Saturday.
That's incredible. By the way, I'm over outside of Douglasville.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too far from you.
I know Douglasville is on the west side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Southwest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Colonel Ellis, I love that story, and I think one of the things that you may not even recognize is there's certainly the leadership consulting and helping to coach somebody through that, but then there's also the really special thing of what you personally endured in that small community of those men that you were in that cell with, that can permeate and make a ripple unlike few others can, because of what you had to go through. So it may just carry a little bit more weight coming from someone like you. So the fact that you take the time, that you've made a continued career out of service, out of helping leaders to get better and to serve better, it's just a testament to you and the man that you are. It's been an absolute privilege and honor for you to come and spend some time with us today. Before you sign off, is there anything you want to share with our alphas that we didn't get a chance to discuss?
Do you asking me?
Yes, sir. Is there anything you want to share that we didn't get a chance to discuss?
I think being with a team who's gone through something that you've gone through really was helpful. That was so helpful to us. And our leaders had gone through more torture and more solitary confinement. Reisner, Denton, and Stockdale were their three senior leaders for the most of the time. And they were in solitary confinement. They were there 7.5 years. They had all spent more than 4 years in solitary confinement. Now, they had connections their time. But Reisner, for instance, was in solitary confinement in total darkness for 10 months. And that's when I first met him and started communicating with him secretly. But these guys, they just kept bouncing back. And they would, and when they had a cellmate, and one guy, Stockdale, had a Navy Lieutenant J.G. He was a group commander on a ship when he was shot down and captured in 65, and a guy was shot down in 67. Dan Glenn was his cellmate, and he told him, I'm going to put out some back U.S. policy, a little bit more details of some things that we can put in to take one level down from the code of conduct about how to operate and how to behave. And so he went over it with Dan and listened to Dan's feedback, who was a Lieutenant JG. And that was just a wonderful thing. Our leaders would listen to us and take into account what we had to say. And the leaders treated us, the junior guys, like we were somebody. And that was very important. We became more humble too, and more confident.
Awesome. Well, you certainly had some of the most remarkable leaders on the planet to learn from, and we consider you to be one as well, Colonel Ellis. We'll have your show handles and links, your social media handles, and links we've talked about in our show notes. And is there a website our alphas can go to learn more about your work?
leadingwithhonor.com and POWromance.com to learn. There's a lot of stories on that, and you can download the first 2 stories of the book, but there's a lot of pictures and podcasts and things with people there there. But we also, I do a monthly blog, about a 700, 800 word blog on leadership every month. And like I said earlier, I've been talking about some of those models, the Courageous Accountability model last year. And this one, I talk about the Engage and Align model, where how to get a group together in your team and discuss things and listen to everybody before you make a decision. And then, because it's going to be so much more supported when you get them all together and talk about it and make that decision. So anyway, you can download the coaching video, 5 or 6 minute coaching video, and the blog, whichever one you want, every month. And a lot of those lessons, the leadership lessons that we learned in the POW camp, amazing how some of those are so similar to relations and good marriages and relationships. You got to be committed. You got to listen to the other person, and they're going to have different talents than you are, You know, Joe, you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
You're going to have different talents than you are, and some important, treating people with respect, trusting people, and being trustworthy. All of those things are so important.
It means so much that you spent this time with us today, and so of course thank you so much for visiting. We look forward to seeing you do more amazing things and sharing your experiences. And so Alphas, please stick around. We've got some scuttlebutt after the break.
Hey, be willing to show up for a veteran. Be willing to trust your gut, follow your heart, and take a risk. Be willing to sit without saying a word, without checking the time. Be the one who's willing to ask, to guess wrong, to even offend another, to keep them safe, to remind them that they are valuable. If you know a veteran, be the one to reach out and make them a part of your life.
Okay, Alphas, we hope you had a great break. Now it's time for that scuttlebutt. Adam.
Well, the holidays are done. All the tinsel has been cleared away, except for Joe. We know Joe's lights are still shining bright.
At
We're all
least till
trying to
late March.
work off the extra cookies and eggnog we consume. And now it's time to start thinking about, that's right, baseball. Who had baseball? 2025 is the 100th anniversary of the American Legion Baseball. And now is the time for posts and departments to start planning for their summer celebrations. The initial resolution proposing an American Legion baseball program was passed at the Department of South Dakota's convention on July 17, 1925. American Legion Baseball was organized to teach practical lessons in sportsmanship and citizenship by emphasizing such qualities as loyalty, respect for the rules, fair play, courage, and physical fitness. In October 1975 issue of the American Legion magazine, then Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Bowie Kuhn, wrote about the game. The idea of American Legion Baseball wasn't put forward simply to get youngsters to play a game. There was a unanimous agreement that while baseball would help in physical training and get kids off the streets, it would also be a school for all sorts of intangible values in the game of life, such as citizenship, teamwork, and integrity. Nobody ever said that about shooting pool or playing tag, not that I know of anyway. For me, it boils down to this. The American Legion baseball program is a national asset, and every person involved should be proud of the role he or she has played. National headquarters has created a toolkit for department baseball chairmen and post leaders to use to spread the word as we celebrate 100 years of American Legion baseball to plan local events. I don't know. What are you guys thinking? I say we take the broadcast show on the road next year for the 100th anniversary.
I just need to know what your opinion is on crying in baseball.
I absolutely believe there is room for crying in baseball.
Yeah.
I think there's all
There's no
all the
crying
feeling.
in baseball.
I think Tom Hanks was absolutely full of malarkey. I think
Yeah.
there's all the feels in baseball.
It is very healthy to cry. You should
I
be able
agree.
to cry, especially if you don't hit a home run or you get out. You should be able to cry about that.
Well,
Or
I'm
you're
sorry,
holding
but
the
so
bat
many of those
wrong.
gals had to wear skirts, and that is for me enough to cry about. So, and especially if you had to skid into base and get those bruises.
The
More power
sad
to
thing
them.
is I think that most guys wish that society had went the other way and we got to wear the skirts.
I can see
'Cause,
that.
I mean, seriously. I mean, obviously, it's
Well, I
it's
think
one
the
of those
Scottish,
things.
kind of figured it out a little bit. They made
Yeah.
wearing skirts cool. But hey, real question. Do you think that Alabama will once again win the championship like they did this last year?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I full disclosure, don't watch sports. I support it, but I don't watch it.
Well, if you had and you would have watched the 99th meeting and championship of the American Legion Baseball, then you'd know that the post out of Troy, Alabama, I believe it was Troy, yeah. And I think that that's their second title in a short amount of time. So there's some special things happening in the with the baseball Kool-Aid in Alabama.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean,
So
I feel like that the South really loves sports and the North is really competitive. And so I think that a lot of times sports teams were created in the North out of just sheer spite and competitiveness. We can't let them, they're having too much fun down there. Let's make them
the
lose.
sports teams in the North were only created so they could have rivalries. Like, we just want another reason to beat you. we shall establish a university and a sports program,
dominance.
so we don't have to go to actual war. Hatfield and McCoy's.
Well, so
these
how
cool
come when
kids,
like Tech and Georgia Tech play, how come they don't call it like the Civil War? How come they don't? Maybe just the connotation.
some rivalries are
That might
called
be a
the
little
Civil
too
War.
on the nose for a
A
southern
little too
state,
on
though.
the nose. That's true.
So these toolkits that they're putting together includes the history of American Legion baseball, sample press releases, media advisories, and social media posts, and testimonials from Legion baseball alumni who went on to the major leagues. That's pretty cool. More resources will be made available as planning at the national level continues. We'll have the link to the toolkit in our show notes, and you can also visit legion.org/baseball for more information as it becomes available. All right, Scuttlebutt number 2. What do you got for us, Joe?
Our friends at military.com reprinted this piece from SFGate. So NASA scientists accidentally find nuclear fever dream in Arctic snow. Yeah, of course.
What does that mean?
Was this on your bingo card?
This
was
feels like
online.
another Holly special.
Yeah, maybe. And that's okay because I love these. So NASA's April 2024 expedition to the Greenland ice sheet was supposed to play out like every other geological research mission. At the time, scientist Chad Green, totally normal name. There's nothing. He doesn't sound like he's a conspiracy
Chad
theorist. So
Green.
there's got to be some heat to this. Was soaring above the barren landscape in a Gulfstream 3. Small aircraft. It's nothing like an Apache. Don't get defensive, Adam.
Oh no, Gulfstreams are pretty nice.
Yeah, I like them. Of course, I can't fly one, but I can look at them on the internet. A small aircraft previously used to transport astronauts returning from Kazakhstan to Houston after completing various space missions. So the coder and satellite specialist, along with a team of engineers, was closely monitoring the radar as it mapped the 1,380-mile-long terrain's hidden icy layers. But when they took a photo, they noticed something unusual, a cluster of turquoise dots in a vast expanse of black nothingness. That's starting to look pretty creepy. So he's Alex Gardner, a scientist at NASA California-based Jet Propulsion Laboratory, said, "We were looking for the bed of the ice in Outpops Camp Century." So though it's been well documented over the years, their data captured by an uninhibited aerial vehicle synthetic aperture radar, that's one thing. That's a thing called the uninhabited aerial vehicle synthetic aperture radar, attached to the belly of the aircraft, revealed the lost structure in a way that's never been seen before. Green went on to say, "You can see the scale, you can see the size of it, you can see the individual structures and tunnels." So part research facility, part war machine, the clandestine underground military site once housed up to 200 soldiers and scientists who dutifully studied ice core samples during the height of the Cold War. And what better place to study the Cold War than in the ice? This is tracking for me so far. So the nuclear powered operation, complete with an experimental subsurface railway, ultimately designed to help launch 600 missiles and provide year-round accommodations for its personnel. It's both comfortable and dangerous. Was supposed to be entombed in snow for eternity after authorities decommissioned it in 1967. But the bones of Project Iceworm may soon reemerge, as scientists worry that global warming will exhume its toxic waste, leading to grave environmental consequences. What is happening in the world when you can't just bury your secrets under the ice and forget about them?
Or your barrels of nuclear waste. Come on.
Can't we just move on? I've got a better idea. Let's just throw it out into space, where it can circle the Earth forever. That way we don't ever have to worry about it ever again.
Yeah, but I think we're going to have a Wall-E situation at some point.
I love how they're trying to blame this on global warming. And I'm not saying anything about global warming. I'm saying, like, look, we buried some toxic waste. It should have been fine. Is this your fault? Stop driving the cars that we're building. Wow. So built 125 miles inland from Island Coast in 1959 and located 100 feet below the surface. The secret bunker was originally designed to test the feasibility of launching nuclear missiles from the Arctic, the closest pathway between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. The only problem, however, was that U.S. officials didn't exactly have permission to build the so-called city under the ice. They don't need permission. You can do anything until you get caught.
This feels very us.
That's so us. That's so Raven. During Cold War tensions, the Danes only allowed the U.S. to construct military bases in designated areas in Greenland, such as an Air Force base and a defense area in the northwest of the country. But during a cocktail party, this is the Tun Tavern of nuclear waste.
You guys didn't mean that, really?
During the cocktail party,
Never for our martini shaken, not
that goes by the name of 007.
So, guys, I've got a plan, see? Ha! So in August at a cocktail party, August of 1959, Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs Jens Otto Krag was horrified to learn that the Americans were secretly digging tunnels deep in the Greenland. If you can't trust Americans in the 50s, who can you trust? Ice sheet during the thermal drills, according to a historical article on the era published in Science Nordic magazine. Science Nordic. So the decision to move forward with the audacious project was a dreadful blunder, American Ambassador Val Peterson recalled. As Danish authorities scrambled to craft a careful public narrative surrounding the nuclear operation, journalists visited the underground site only to be restricted by officials. Just pour water on it, it'll freeze. But ultimately, a third world war never came so far. Right, guys? And the U.S. government's need for a nuclear reactor in Greenland was never realized. Authorities rejected Project Iceworm in 1963, and year-round operations shut down 1 year later. In 1967, it was decommissioned entirely. As a result, the site... Go ahead.
Or was it?
Or was it?
Can I just interject while we're taking a pause here?
Please do.
Project Iceworm, I keep envisioning that Beetlejuice sandworm.
Yeah.
But only in an iceworm version.
That's a good one, Lydia.
I just want to know if this is really a cover for what lies beyond the ice wall of Antarctica and the flat Earth model.
I don't even have to add on to that one.
Winter is coming, Adam.
I mean, I think this is just a big guise for what's really going on there.
I think it's clear that despite that everything in space that we see is round and 3D, it's entirely feasible that we're on a Frisbee. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, wait, what's the planet with the big rings around it? That's flat.
The ring? Are you think we're on a ring?
Wait, no, we could be, yeah. If we're talking about Frisbees.
That's true.
Was this before or after the global pact of Antarctica, that all the nations came together and agreed that nobody would hold land down there? What year did that happen?
What year did I learn Antarctic history in school? I don't remember. Was that 8th grade?
That was chapter 5, section 1.2.
So
1959.
59.
So that's why.
I remember that.
Do those type of things, and that's probably why the Danish guy was like, "Hey, we all agreed nobody would do anything." What do you guys
just like
doing?
the Geneva Convention. Hey guys, that's not fair.
Also, I love the Danish guy's name, Jens Otto Krag. That's such a Danish name if I've ever heard of.
Get your parts from Auto Parts and Jens Otto Krags.
It's a good name. It's way better than Joe. I'll take
It's like a motocross race team.
I just imagine this Danish minister being like, "I am horrified to learn what those Americans, those Yanks, are doing down there with their ice and their nuclear waste.
What do you mean the 470 flatbeds that they took over the?
Here's the other funny part to me: the journalists visited the underground site only to be restricted by officials. Like I just imagine this journalist getting all the way to Antarctica. Like, we're gonna see the site, and then the Americans are like, "No, we're not gonna let you in. What are you doing?"
What are you here for? I'm here to see
here to
the
tell the world about-
24
your
million
credentials.
liters of biological waste. There is no waste here.
Yeah.
Really?
No, I'm sorry. We're gonna have to restrict you on that.
I don't know they had to make the attempt though.
Yeah.
Literally, the
Yeah.
ice
No,
behind them
wow.
is melting as she speaks. Right.
If you're gonna give me a free trek to Antarctica, I will probably take it up, Holly.
Yeah. Me too.
We will report on Fearvana down there crossing the Arctic tundra.
We got a buddy that took a trip to Antarctica, right? We got to check up on him.
Yeah, I'm following on Instagram, Fearvana. If you're out there, buddy, keep going.
We love you.
I think he told us it was 10 to 11 hour days of pulling a 400-pound sled for
Wow.
110 straight days.
We'll
if I
put a
remember
show
correctly.
notes to that episode. And
So tell him to swing by Iceworm and see what. actually
what is
better
going
yet-
on down there, dude?
Actually, better yet, if it's global
Visit the
warming.
tunnels. Check out the
He
tunnels.
may get restricted though.
Sorry,
Maybe
we're
we
gonna have to
shouldn't send him.
restrict you.
So authorities rejected it, and it was shut down a year later. It was decommissioned entirely in '67, or as Adam said, or was it?
Or was
As a result, the site, along with its 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, that sounds expensive, 24 million liters of biological.
From 200 dudes?
That's a lot of poop.
24 million liters.
24
Hold
million
on, wait,
liters
that's
of
not
poop.
adding up. I thought they said it was like for 200 dudes.
We might need to do a follow-up on that. Who's weighing that stuff? All right,
Who's got
Jim,
that
you
shitty
go
job?
weigh the
It's
poop.
an underground military site once housed 200 soldiers inside. What's the math on that?
What were they eating?
Cheese.
Sorry, all we have is
Government
cans
cheese.
of beans.
I'm telling you, it's not adding up, guys. It's not adding up.
And 1.2 million units of radioactive waste. So there's biological waste and radioactive waste left behind, forever buried in the snow, or so everyone thought.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about.
Decades after it was abandoned, numerous scientists have come forward citing the dangers of Camp Century. Yeah, it's, anytime you start to get caught, there's always going to be somebody like, I told them, but that's what I said. I was the first person to say it. Poses to the region's aquatic ecosystem and multi-billion-dollar resources. Not only would it contaminate a large swath of centuries-old ice that holds a plethora of scientific data, it would also pose the risk of making its way out to sea and contaminating a diverse ecosystem, like the entire world. I added that on. That's a quote from the 2016 article from Michigan State University. In addition, researchers believe the site is likely just one of many that pose such a threat in our warming world. I mean, there was a comedian, I think he was talking about, he's like, I don't believe in every conspiracy theory. He's like, but I'm open-minded, because if you think the government's just batting 1,000, they've never lied to us before. So the link will be in the show notes, and I think we've extrapolated upon this one pretty extensively.
Yes.
This
Or
is just
have
why
we?
24
Or have
million liters.
I've been really trying, baby. Can we get you in the mood for this next one? Because here we go. What was intended to be a passionate hotel room rendezvous, you Marines, turned into nothing more than a smoldering chamber of sorrow. Approximately 20 candles were lit by Marines, sparked a fire that left the room's confines crispier than intended. That sounds hot.
Oh, no.
What? Box of
Did
chocolate.
we just get a snort out of
No,
Adam? That's a
sorry.
first.
Molten fondue.
Tales from the core.
You know he didn't even do it himself. He had the boots light the candles. He probably blamed them.
The unnamed sergeant
that's
assigned to
hot.
Camp Schwab told police the candles were intended to be a surprise for his partner, who he'd gone to pick up. Wait, hold on a second.
Lit the candles and left.
Describe the candles. Were they cheap dollar store jobs, or did he go for a Yankee candle?
Ironically, they were LED.
Oh no.
Who he'd gone to pick up at a nearby Naha airport on November 14th. While leaving that, he would become a conflagration unintended.
Oh,
The
what?
Marine was arrested the following day by Okinawa prefectural police and
Yeah.
taken into custody by the Naha police station. A police spokesperson said the hotel room was completely burned, and the sergeant was arrested for putting people of the hotel and surrounding area at risk. Well, no duh. The damage was fortunately contained to one room with no injuries or additional destruction reported. Well, except for all the things that he had in the room, which I'd be curious to see what he had intended.
He's like, "Can I get my
on
candles
whether
back?"
or not any charges were filed beyond the accusation of loving too intensely
Been there.
have not yet been made available, and whether the partner really appreciated the efforts. Still, one would think a branch commonly associated with crayon eating would be better versed with properties of wax.
Well, it was the furry love cuffs that did him in.
Yeah, the one candle too close to the love cuffs.
I see a nice little sketching book of drawings talking about fire safety with
Tastefully
your
nude.
partner. Blacked out bars over the bikini areas about how to have candle safety with your sexual partners when
Yeah.
prepping hotels for all those shore duties. Or
I made a joke about having a boot do it. He legitimately should have. He just had him sit in the room. Hey, I'm on my way back. Light them up.
20 candles is a bit.
get that Marvin Gaye queued up.
Boys to men.
Baby, 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 baby. Hey, Alphas, let me know what your favorite, music is to get your hotel burning music in the
To
mood.
get your rocks rolling.
Yeah,
That wasn't a great joke.
that was not a great joke. No,
I,
please don't tell me that. But if you have any funny stories like this one, feel free to write me. I am all about sharing those on this podcast. They if you can make me cry laughing, I am all about it.
I just want to say that Regiment is a gaming group that has a Discord, and they're super active. They come out to the American Legion. They're actually partners with us. They're a fantastic group of people. I jump on and talk to them, and there's always a chat room with people just hanging out. And it's so funny. It's like walking in a room with people you already know. I have so much fun whenever I'm writing or something like that, and I just need a break. I jump in there and talk to them. But their Twitter's hilarious. They have a thing that drops, on the weekend sometimes where it says, safety brief for the weekend. Don't add to the population. Don't subtract to the population. If you end up in jail, establish dominance quickly.
Those are good tips.
It's good. It's a good tip.
Good tips.
I think that they should also add, please don't leave burning candles in an empty hotel room, Marine.
Well,
Yeah.
if you switch to the LED smelly candles, you'd be fine.
Yeah, just stick to LED candles. That's right, Adam.
Well, we'll have links to all that in the show notes. And Alphas, we love you. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next
I've been
week.
really trying, baby.